I just wanted to thank everybody for coming into the session. I'm really looking forward to watching your panel today on expanding our reach, improving cultural diversity, and building careers. And with that, I'm not going to take any more time. Cynthia, I know you're moderating this panel. I'm in the background. Give me a shout whenever you need me, if you need me. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Maureen. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on expanding our reach, improving cultural diversity, and building careers. I'm your moderator, Cynthia Chaudhary. I'm the National Project Coordinator at Ready, Willing, and Able, and today I'll be assisting in exploring this topic with you all today. So before we get into introductions, I just wanted to thank DWC for giving us this platform to speak today. And just a little tidbit on RWA for those who don't know. We are a national partnership of Inclusion Canada and the Autism Alliance of Canada and their member organizations. And it is a free program designed to increase the labor force participation of people with an intellectual disability or on the autism spectrum. And I do want to add that RWA has helped thousands of Canadian businesses to become more inclusive workplaces. So to get connected, visit readywillingandable.ca. I'll probably post it somewhere in the chats for you to all access soon. Now for the exciting part. So this year, RWA embarked on 10 youth employment pilot projects with 10 Black, Indigenous, and communities of color across Canada, where they were able to create employment pilot programs culturally centered for youth with an intellectual disability or on the autism spectrum within their community. And while I wish I could have all the project members here today, I'm so pleased to introduce, I think we were supposed to have 4, but I think 3 are here. We might get the 4th one soon. Community leaders here who've been so instrumental in the success of our recent employment pilot project. They are so steadfast in upholding and advocating the needs of their respective communities. So I want to turn it to them to introduce themselves. Delaney, maybe we can start with you, just a little bit about yourself and maybe what you hope to take away from today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Delaney King, and I'm based in Saskatchewan, where it is -45 here today. So another beautiful day in Saskatchewan. So yeah, I have had the opportunity to work with Cynthia and Ready, Willing, Able, and we actually work with 2 primary communities here. And my hope is to kind of learn from others what they were able to do and maybe implement those strategies within our communities, but also share some of our own strategies that might be able to help others.
Amazing. Thank you for joining us today. Anna, so happy to have you here.
Hi, this is Anna. I'm the Executive Director from Community Family Services of Ontario. We are the only family service agency, mental health and disability special needs agency for East Asian community in Ontario, believe it or not. Diverse province, big province, but you know, there it is. We serve Cantonese, Mandarin, Vietnamese, Tagalog speaking newcomers, racialized, and most often poverty with multiple vulnerabilities, including language barrier, lack of systemic awareness, and all of that. I hope to, join my colleagues here to understand whatever is being implemented across Canada and take away best practices and maybe to contribute an insight or 2 regarding the racialized community needs.
Amazing. Thanks for joining us. Carolyn?
Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here and so happy to meet you face to face. Some of the other folks who have been so instrumental in really pushing and amplifying the voices of systemically hidden and silenced communities. I'm with the Youth Alliance for Intersectional Justice, or YAGE for short. And we certainly had some very interesting and insightful understandings of what the struggles are of Black youth in Canada, and Black youth specifically in the province of Ontario and British Columbia. in terms of young people with intellectual disabilities, varied disabilities, as well as physical disabilities as well. So quite insightful and very grateful to youth who actually spent their time and took the time to work with us. And so I'm looking forward to also learning from y'all what insights you have to share as well. Thank you.
So happy to have you here. And last but not least, Darshi, thanks for joining.
Hi there, everybody. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit under the weather today, so bear with my voice, it might crack. I'm Darshi Polio. I am the Director of Human Resources and SAC community at the SAC Autism Center. The SAC Autism Center is a multidisciplinary learning center composed of clinical supervisors, social workers, instructional therapists, and artists, among others. And they're all working collaboratively to provide a really rich learning experience. And our mission is, much like many, making autism services equitable for all Canadians. And our guiding principle really empowers us to defeat ignorance, embrace differences, and conquer stigma. So I'm quite happy to be here today and really provide my insight and learn from you all as well. Thank you.
Thanks so much. We're so happy to have all four of you here today. You know, like throughout this week's conference, we've heard so much about the strides being made in inclusive employment, and we want to make sure those efforts and those benefits are accessible to all communities. We know that job seekers and employees with disabilities who are from racial or ethnic communities have unique experiences based on the intersection of race and disability. So we're really hoping today to have a conversation that really helps to address and improve some of the equity gaps that exist today. So perhaps we can kind of get started by getting a better understanding of the employment needs in the different communities represented here today. So we're going to start broad, but I know oftentimes with these conversations, we talk so much about the challenges and the needs, and I don't want to reduce any community to just those things. So I wanted to start maybe about, I wanted to know a bit more about your communities, but the specific question that I'm going to ask you all is if you can share one strength or joy from your community. And I'll start with Delaney.
Yeah. So we work primarily with two communities, One Arrow First Nation and Beardy's and Okomesis First Nation. They're both Cree nations in Saskatchewan. And I would say the strengths that they have is their cultural, the cultural components. So they do a lot of Cree classes, they do a lot of learning to smudge, working with elders and things like that. So that was really important to us. And we had lots and lots of support from the community. And as far as challenges for the community themselves, we're in a rural area. So we are quite a distance away from any kind of employment. And systemically, there's been a lot of issues with finding employment on reserves. I don't know if many people are aware of this, but there's typically no post office, no bank, no any kind of like no grocery stores, anything like that on the reserves. The only thing that they do have are schools. And they were built around the time of residential schools as part of the requirement. So that was about it. So those are some of the key challenges is finding employment within the community so that we could have community members helping us the whole way along. And also finding, words that relate to a lot of the things we're talking about. So one of them was, we had a Cree word, pito tetium, meaning he or she thinks differently. And that was a big connection for the elders that we were working with to kind of understand that we wanted to see the benefits or the strengths that the gifts were given by the Creator. So yeah, we typically struggle the biggest with finding employment because there's not a lot to be employed on in these very, very rural communities.
Thank you, Delaney. In that case, why don't I move on to the next question? I think it'll mend well to a lot of what you touched on, Delaney. With today's greater theme being the sense of belonging, you all put so much effort into creating an environment where your community feels like they belong. So this project was so different from what we noticed is it was so different from community to community, and mostly because each community is so different and did everything so differently and catered to those specific needs. And oftentimes what I see is you'll see an English program translated and bam, it's culturally competent, there you go off on your way. But obviously you did so much more than that to center your culture. And what I want to ask you all is, how do you think that cultural centering positively impacted your participants' job readiness or employment for the future? And maybe, Anne, I'll start with you. Like, how did that cultural centering impact the job readiness for the participants in that program?
Right. First, to understand the needs of the ethnic community that I serve, you have to understand that they don't come out saying, I have a need. Come out saying, I need help, right? First off, the awareness is low. They're not aware. And then once they're aware, they probably think it's, oh, that Johnny next door, right? In denial, right? And once they're accepting that it is their problem, they have that barrier of stigma to actually divulge the fact that, come to terms with the fact that they have a problem or they have a challenge and therefore seek help. So by the time they seek help, the problems are usually very severe, a lot more than just, oh, there is a special need or there is a disability and therefore there is a difficulty looking for work, right? Oftentimes it is chronic depression, chronic anxiety, coupled with heightened tension within the family, with a lot of conflicts and lack of support and a lot of shame by the individual and by the family. And therefore, the individual themselves are not ready to work, right? So it doesn't matter if I were to just give you a job one day, they won't be able to retain it. So it goes a long way more than just your regular, let's say the YMCA, edit your CV, tell you how to prepare for a job interview type thing. You have to mentally prep the individual to be ready for work and prep the whole family to be able to help detect signs and increase awareness and sensitivity to provide the wraparound support that person needs so that they are not only ready for work now, but continue to be ready and willing to stay in that job. So once they actually are able to secure the job, never mind the stigma outside and the employers and all of that, right? They have the job there. They have to also be mentally fit and supported with families to be able to retain it. So I think those are the hardest, the biggest challenges that we have as providers, but that's also something that we have very solid understanding for, and therefore we are able to start there deep down in the mental psyche versus just go ahead and just shove a resume or a job posting at you type thing.
Thank you so much for that elaborate response. I'm going to touch on this some more throughout our conversation, but you touched on so much of the ecosystem of it all. I'm going to move on to Darshi, if you wanted to comment on. I mean, SAC started in the basement of Geetha's home, and it was obviously to respond to a need in the community, and it's grown to this amazing, huge organization. So I'm so excited to hear about how you think the cultural centering positively impacted participants in their job readiness and employment.
Yeah. So in our 14-year experience at the South Asian Autism Center, youth with disabilities from South Asian and Southeast Asian communities in Toronto come from environments, like we just heard, are less likely to understand the developmental disabilities, the developmental health system and related support services. It's a very difficult topic to address. So we found that a lack of community knowledge around disabilities and the dearth of support of disability issues in their home countries further permits South and East Asian caregivers to believe that, nothing can be done. But we further see from our experience that these South Asian communities, there is an overprotection of loved ones with disabilities, especially females, which encourages caregivers to be fearful, I would say, of pursuing programs related to employment and housing. I know one of the questions Kingston had asked told me that, we should talk about are some of the ways our community's employment needs can be supported. And I strongly believe that in order to help youth from these communities, we must build those important resources and raise awareness and empower caregivers, like we already spoke about, to believe that their loved ones are capable of greater challenges. And they really should be allies with service providers, with us, to support their children's transition into adulthood. Some of these strategies that we took in this very last year include, we took a a strength-based approach, empowering young adults with employable skill sets by integrating sort of a widely recognized certifications into the program in order to demonstrate the capabilities of youth with disabilities to the potential employers. We raised also a lot of awareness among caregivers in the business community about the capacities of the youth in our employment training program. And throughout the delivery of outreach events, they were both in person and virtual. We translated resources and partnerships with ethnic media outlets in Toronto. We looked to increase knowledge and awareness of employment capacities of youth with disabilities from South and East Asian communities in Toronto. And really many of our associates specifically told me that finding jobs that provide accommodations during the interview process and the structure, so basically shorter shifts, was what was most difficult for them to get. So many hadn't done an interview before and found that the questions and answers and practical assessments they did at the Goodness Gift really helped them showcase their talents and their abilities. So what we did is we adapted the entire interview process to be more accommodating, really, and this really helped them become more independent. And I saw such an improvement in their self-confidence and their belief of their own abilities.
Could you tell us about the Goodness Gift? I know it's holiday times and everyone's purchasing those things. So I want to do a little plug.
So the Goodness Gift is our social enterprise. And what it is we market the Goodness Gift as gift giving for businesses, small or large, Canadian or not Canadian. And every single dollar that comes in through the Goodness Gift, it is used to train and employ members on the spectrum. So currently we have about 15 employees, and they are responsible from order taking to inventory, to purchasing, to posting, to sales. It brings such a smile to my face because, like I said, they wouldn't have been employed in any other way. And we took drastic measures to sort of train and develop them in ways that supported their learning. And they're incredible. And the Goodness Gift is working because of them. We have our instructional therapists and trainers that work alongside with them. But from A to Z, it's them putting it together. And they're even involved in sales. So they make some sales calls and they present the Goodness Gift and they do videos talking about, you know, how much they love it, testimonials. So it's our social enterprise, but beyond that, it's a way for them to feel needed and like they're contributing members in their households. They take their checks and they really give them to their parents. And it's just an incredible experience what the Goodness Gift has brought to the lives of these children, young adults.
Thanks so much for sharing. And last but not least, Carolyn, I'll repeat the question because I know we talked about so much already. How do you think that culturally centering positively impacted the participants' job readiness or employment?
Yeah, absolutely. These are all really great initiatives that we're hearing about, and it's really inspiring. The Youth Alliance for Intersectional Justice, or YAGE, is unique in that we are a youth-led organization. So it's youth really partnering, working with, strategizing with other youth. It's youth connecting with other youth and creating networks, and that in itself is culturally grounded. And so you have Black youth who are working with Black youth who happen to have these different disability labels. So that's quite unique. I think what we found helpful otherwise, you know, in terms of culturally grounding is that we asked youth to tell us, you know, what are your dreams? What are your employment dreams? What are your career goals? So instead of us setting the pace and setting the tone, it's youth telling us, you know, what do you dream of? You know, what would you like to do? And connecting what they enjoy, what they're interested in, what they feel that they are competent at doing or that they would like to learn, and matching that with their employment experiences. So that we found was really helpful. And in doing so, connecting them with members of the Black community. And so it's kind of twofold, a double-edged sword, in that the members of the Black community, business communities, got to spend time with and work with youth in our Youth Employment Futures program. And at the same time, youth envisioned and saw for themselves physically before them, people who worked in different capacities and people who owned their own businesses. And so that cultural connection is just absolutely invaluable. The other thing is that we employed youth within the program. So we weren't only looking at external opportunities for employment, but actually hiring youth and connecting youth with employers and employment opportunities within the Black disability community, which is quite small. So we actually had youth who were peer interviewers. So they were hired within the program to be peer interviewers. They interviewed their peers. They interviewed people who wanted to be part of this project to find out, what do youth dream about in terms of their future? What are their career goals? What do they see themselves doing 5 years from now in terms of a job? Who's thinking about opening businesses for themselves? So it was not just jobs and employment, but it was also entrepreneurship and connecting youth with people who look like them, people who have a similar culture, and also their own peers that they can connect with to learn from and to teach. So yeah, it was absolutely inspiring.
I love that. And the big buzzword that comes into my mind when you talked about what you just said is career advancement. And we've been doing a lot of work around that. It's picking up pace. We want more people to start divulging into career advancement and thinking about what the next steps of their careers would look like. So it's a big piece that we're working on as well. So I'm so happy that you've been able to integrate those pieces into your project as well. I wanted to move on. I'm so inspired by everything that's been talked about so far, and it's only been a few minutes. But I kind of wanted to kind of delve deeper into the difficult parts. So if I could start with asking, what would you say are some of I know it's been mentioned a little bit, but I kind of want to, while we have all these, eyeballs on us today from different parts of the ecosystem here, I really want to take advantage of this platform and really showcase the needs that exist just with this small sample here today. So my question would be, what would you say is, like, if you could pick one or two, what are the difficult parts of getting employment for the youth you support? Delaney, I want to start with you. I want to let you all know I have the great pleasure of visiting these two reserves a couple months ago, and I learned so much. It's just so hard to really conceptualize these things on paper. It's a whole other thing, kind of like being in person and seeing it all right in front of your face. So I want to ask you, Delaney, what would you say are some of the difficult parts of getting employment for the youth you supported?
Yeah, well, it was nice to have you too. Come out and see everything in person. One of the big things, I would say major struggles, is misdiagnosis for us in Saskatchewan. So a lot of, they actually did a study, and what happened was we found that a lot of people were being diagnosed as having FASD when in fact they have autism. And it was quite a high number. And a lot of parents have been fighting for a long time to have their child diagnosed with autism, and the medical community was not having any of it, kind of thing. Quite a big struggle. The second thing was overcoming the challenge, or the idea that what having a neuro difference is seen as a gift, as a positive thing, and not necessarily a negative thing that would follow you through life. And so a lot of times, unfortunately, it was systemic from residential schools that there was this, if you were different, it resulted in very bad things. So you did not want to be different, and you did not want to have that come out. So a lot of our youth, obviously living with parents and grandparents who had gone to residential schools, held that same belief system, that they did not want to be different in any way, shape, or form. So those were some of our bigger challenges, was letting them know that it's okay to be different, and that you can still contribute to the community in many amazing ways. And that, you can kind of take the lead and be the change for the community itself. And those were kind of our biggest challenges to overcome. And thankfully, we had wonderful, wonderful knowledge keepers and elders that came out and helped us with those changes.
Thank you. Anna, the difficult parts of getting employment for the youth that you support?
It would be the lack of understanding in the employment sector, as employers are. It's not like they're not they're trying to be no exclusive, right? But more, they're not aware of the severity of the impact on their day-to-day tasks, and therefore not confident that they're able to provide such accommodations, and not confident that their clients, if it's a retail-facing industry, that their clients are accepted for that, and also not confident that such youth or individuals hired would be able to retain and sustain the job, and also at the same time keep their mental health going well, right? So all of these uncertainties and anxiety add to the fact that it makes willing people not ready to provide such opportunities. And they, because of the lack of even terminology of such conditions in these traditional cultures, right? They typically, if it was stigmatized, I can still tell that there are the grandparent generations that tell their daughter-in-law that, well, my grandson has no problem. You're the one with the problem. You gave birth to him and you gave him some bad genes because you're a lunatic, and therefore there is this element in him, and that's your problem. You're making people call him a lunatic. That's because you're a lunatic. Right? So different family values and understanding, and the lack of terminology even to describe such, it shows you a variety of the lack of understanding, as in, the difference between being a lunatic, wrong term to use at all, mental health conditions, right? Versus emotional disorder conditions, versus intellectual disability, versus developmental delay, ASD versus Asperger's versus reading and writing disabilities, right? All of those are very different. And they don't seem to understand any of the dissections of such. And therefore it all just becomes, you're saying my grandson is crazy, right? So that would be something that is impairing a family affected by such disability to be willing to accept it and get the right types of help to be able to access the employment market.
Thanks so much for sharing that. I'm actually going to get to family in a little bit. That was great. I want to turn it to Carolyn to talk a bit about what are some of the challenges or difficult parts of getting employment for the youth that you supported.
Absolutely. Do you mind if I share do I have time to share my screen? Is that okay?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So with the, I hope you can see it, with the peer to peer interviewing and finding out from Black youth what the barriers were, they named, racism and ableism, getting your foot in the door, mentorship, so not having access to mentors, self-employment, logistics, so transportation, something as simple as that, accommodation and masking. So we haven't really talked about masking just yet, but that is, and we always left it up to the empowerment coaches, always left it up to youth, whether or not they wanted to reveal the type of disability that they had, or even that they had a disability in terms of connecting with a new employer. And so the young people who were in the program, we listed both the triumphs and the challenges, but some of the challenges, obviously the disability stigma. So Anna's talked quite a bit about that. And so within the Black community and in different Black communities, disability is a bad word. And young people are often either ignored, or they are used to, not being able to kind of talk about their challenges and some of the barriers that they face. And so creating a safe space for them to talk about it and for them to be helped through this whole process was extremely important. Workplace routines were also a challenge. So for some of the youth that were in the program, the simple idea of getting up at the same time every single morning to show up to work and planning those pieces, that was challenging. And so they needed the support in order to do that. And the employers also needed support to understand how that works, or how that may work, or what that may look like, and what kind of flexibility is necessary. So not only did we provide training and guidance for the youth, but we also did for our employer partners as well. And then we have something called when life gets in the way. So whether that's your emotional health, whether that's, logistics of being able to get to work, or possibly it's that you have spent all your money and maybe you're not managing your money as well as you could. And so that's why you don't have transportation, or that's why you won't have food, or you won't be able to buy anything while you're at work. These little things also were big challenges for some of our youth. Not all of our youth are supported by family. So that's something to think about as well. Our youth were quite unique in this program, in that not everyone had a traditional family or family members or family type support or carer support to rely on. And so that presented very unique challenges.
Thank you for sharing that. I wanted to just pick up on what you talked about in terms of family and roll into our next question. Darcy, I haven't forgotten about you. I'm just squeezing questions together for the interest of time.
No.
But so many of the youth projects this year, you guys talked about intergenerational involvement, and there were elders, grandparents, knowledge keepers, family members that were so heavily involved in the projects. And I know for so many communities that family piece, or that care, that support piece is a big part of the success and the support. And even for a lot of the successful employment programs, they take place early on in teen years. A lot of the pre-employment programs, they start in high school. And so I imagine if families are, like, let's say the gatekeeper to access those employment programs, I imagine it would be pretty important to involve family and be considerate of their needs and their language barriers to integrate as well. So I wanted to, maybe Delaney, you can talk about what the significance of family and the support unit is to the success of a job seeker.
Yeah, so I think listening to Caroline, sorry if I mispronounced that. We have I see a lot of my participants and your participants. A lot of the people that we were working with, or our groups, had lived in foster care a good portion of their life. They, had lost parents and siblings and grandparents. And so one of the things that we found was, by integrating, having the elder circle there to talk with, it really strengthened their will and their want to get out and become a part of and feel like a valued member of the community. We even had a family that hadn't been in the community for 4 years come to the program and become involved in the program because they were smudging, and they had people supporting them for the first time. So I would say that, like, looking at discussing, the barriers with the families, the moms and the dad, but not necessarily moms and dads, aunts, uncles, the elders that were there, helping them to kind of see that you can integrate all of these things and that this has existed for a long time. It just hadn't been talked about. And those support systems are what kept people going and kept that family going, even for, being the first time getting out in 4 years to get a job and get integrated. So it was quite an amazing thing to watch.
Thanks for sharing that. And I'll turn it to you, Darcy. I know family is a big part of a lot of the programming at SAC. Can you speak a little bit more to the support unit and how that might lend to the success of a job seeker or an employee?
Absolutely. I found through much of our interviewing process, we would get emails from the parent or the guardian saying, they're displaying a little bit of anxiety. Are you okay if I sit in with them on the interview or attend the interview with them? And we have always been open and understanding and very empathetic to the needs of the candidate. And we found that they thrived when we provided that little bit of comfort and familiarity with their family members sitting there. So they did so much better. I remember there was one candidate, she was incredible. She was really incredible, but quite hard on herself, and didn't answer the questions to the best of her ability, she thought. I thought she did a great job, but she thought she didn't. And I got a call from her the next day, and she asked, is it okay if I come in with my mother tomorrow? And I want to answer these questions, but I'd like my mom to be with me. And so by all means, we said, okay. We had already selected her to be part of our Goodness Gift, our social enterprise. And I felt I was speaking to an entirely different girl. And I understand a lot of businesses are not going to provide these sort of opportunities, but I really encourage businesses to exercise patience and openness to the process of integrating our participants and their families to the process. But I interviewed with a much different girl, and to this day, she's still a part of the Goodness Gift. But I strongly feel these kind of accommodations, employers really need to work with organizations to create these opportunities, because then, we're not limiting their abilities by doing so. Lots of these mothers still work for SAC, and they work as volunteers because they're just so grateful for the opportunities that we've given their children. So they come in and they help with creating, just even cleaning the environment, or creating different PECS tools for other programs. But they're so appreciative of the fact that we've opened up our doors to them, that they continue to volunteer with us. So
it sounds like a really tight-knit community, and it makes sense as to why there's so much success at the end of all this. You talked about employer mindfulness, and I kind of wanted to move into our next topic, which is, I mentioned earlier, we've seen such incredible work being done with workplaces and employment to be more inclusive, but of course there's still very little representation from Black, Indigenous, communities of color. And I wanted to ask you all, what would you say are some of the things inclusive employment misses or overlooks? And that can include agencies, that can include employers. What are they not taking into consideration when it comes to your community? There seems to be, amazing, in some cases, some great representation within the disability community, but there's still very little representation between the BIPOC disability community within the workforce. So, Delaney, maybe I can start with you. No, yes, I'll start with you, Delaney. I know I've been picking on you quite a bit today. What do you think inclusive employment agencies, employers overlook or miss when it comes to employing or working with your community?
I would say they miss the greater effect that their employment has with the participants. Our participants that were in the program, they had the opportunity to learn. One was carpentry, one was with a mechanic, but more than that, they took that back to the community and were implementing it in the community itself. So one gentleman went and fixed his Kokum's house up. He's like, oh, I'm gonna fix the walls for her. And then another one was like, I'm helping people with their vehicles. Like, I know what to do now. People are calling me. So you could see the value going up in their own confidence and abilities, because normally they said, like, I would have never said anything, but I know how to do that now. So it wasn't just that we told the employer, did you know that you're not just helping them, they're going home and they're helping all these other people. It's a ripple effect, it's having a positive impact upon the community. And I think for the employers, that was a big eye opener. Like, they're like, well, we just took a chance on helping them and seeing if they wanted to do a little bit around here. And it almost seemed to have this rolling down the hill effect where, like, then they were able to do more things, and then they could take more things back. And two of our participants were actually hired by their community to do fixing up houses for the elders that live there. And so that was part of, because they were doing such a great job and they were doing it for free to help out and kind of build that. So that was one of the big things I think the employer didn't realize. The big impact they were having wasn't just one person, it was all of these people, and it had such a wonderful impact on the community.
That's great. I feel like that's a building community capacity. I'm just looking at the time, and I want to turn it to you. I know you mentioned the YMCA a little earlier. What are other programs or initiatives with inclusive employment or agencies and employers that overlook or miss within your community?
In my community, there aren't any, or hardly any, and therefore there are more service gaps than things that they overlook, right? So as an employer that has employed individuals with disabilities and also used volunteers with, let's say, ASD or whatnot, or mental disabilities, what I think in my community, ethnic community, what it misses is people don't understand the definition of disability or vulnerability or accessibility, right? They think of the ramp. My doctoral thesis has everything to do with, like, invisible disabilities. It's not even taken as stats in the censor anymore by federal government, right? So you have no accounts for how many people have invisible disabilities, such as communicative disabilities, learning disabilities, intellectual disabilities. And therefore, as an employer, I was at the Accessibility Alliance yesterday, and these individuals with lived experience are saying, employers are asking me what accommodation I need. How the hell do I know? Why don't you tell me? Right. So for someone with a visual impairment, they don't understand your environment and they can't tell you, okay, for this part of the ramp, I need a rail, right? For this part of the job, I need a magnifying glass for my software, right? And for individuals with limited understanding of, the cognitive processes, complex cognitive processes that go on, they can't tell you this part I can't. And therefore you break it down binary for me. They can't. So it's a catch-22 situation where, the employer doesn't know thoroughly what their challenges and accommodation needs are. And at the same time, people with lived experience aren't able to articulate because they're unable to fully comprehend the environment and the tasks that are demanded of them. So it almost calls for a mediator or intermediary where, it can understand language from both sides and can communicate needs for both sides in the language and modes of communication that they can understand, so that the gap can be bridged. So I think that's something that employers need to be leery about or aware about. It's almost at the present stage, it's checking off the box and avoiding legal consequences, right? So, the law says I need to accommodate whatever they ask for. So I ask them what they need. And if they don't tell me, I'm fine, right? So many a times people don't share their disabilities during the interview and do not ask for accommodations. And only after they sign on the contract, they do so, right? That may actually not prepare them for success in the new job. And that should not be the way to hide the qualities of someone, being ready and willing to take up that job, right? So I think that whole mindset needs to change and the whole framework or process needs to change.
Thank you for sharing that. And to the employers out there, if you're looking for supports on how to make things more inclusive, RWA, that's where you go. It's free, by the way. And I don't want to leave Carolyn out of this because I know we have so many viewers here today. So I want to make sure that you have a chance to let them know what is it that sometimes is overlooked within
Excellent.
the community.
Anna, you have made so many great points. I agree, absolutely. And we're actually moving away from using accommodation, the term, and saying accountability. When you tell people they're accountable, or you tell employees, you know what, this is part of your accountability to your employee. It changes the focus a little bit, right? So as Anna was saying, if you don't have the capacity or you don't have the experience, you don't have the knowledge, you don't know what you don't know in terms of, how to express and how to explain and how to share what your needs are. The other thing too is because it's so stigmatized, a lot of our participants just did not want to reveal what their disability was, or even if they did have a disability. And so that's something to think up as well. How are employers creating safe spaces for employees to share this so that we can start from somewhere? We can start to talk about, okay, well, in this particular case, how can we be accountable to you? Disability rights are human rights. And so again, framing it in those ways, I think helps employers to kind of understand that, yeah, we are accountable. This is another employee and they work differently. They may process information differently, but this is how we're going to be accountable to that employee so they can do the best job that they can. So I think that kind of shift in narrative is important, and also understanding that there is an actual financial gain. So Delaney, you were talking about, participants going back and contributing to their community. Absolutely. So are employers, helping employees to stay in their job, to maintain their job so that they can contribute financially to their communities, make money, contribute to their families and contribute to their communities? And are we also exploring opportunities for entrepreneurship as well? So for the businesses that are in the business of, grants and loans or financing, you're missing out on a whole bunch of different communities of people who could possibly, again, generate income and financial independence, not just for themselves, but for their families and their communities as well. So again, shifting from thinking about accommodating and putting the emphasis on the individual to come to you and tell you, because that it may not be safe to do so, but how can you be accountable to each and every employee and serve the needs that they have so that they can be, really great employees and long-term employees? Yeah.
And I wanted to talk more about, I'm noticing we have 5 more minutes left, but I know we have so many viewers watching here today who might be interested in getting connected and doing some of this work with their local communities. But we know that building trust is fundamental to all of this. And there's just a legacy of history within all these communities that make building trust sometimes trickier. But I wanted to turn it to you. What advice would you have if someone's looking to get connected or connect with their local communities? Delaney?
I would say be prepared to share why you want to do this, because that's a big thing, right? When we went into communities, like the first question out of the mouths of most people are like, why are you here? What do you want? That kind of thing, and sharing like this is our hope. But you know what? We had in each community, we actually had a group of people from every area that we could think of. So the school, from justice, from these other areas come in to share their thoughts and ideas, and therefore take that back to the community and talk about what we were doing and how they could be involved. And we found that opened up a lot of doors. We did a lot of presentations and we went to a lot of feasts and sweats and things like that. So anytime, you have to be prepared to share the why or why you're there and what you can do for the community. And if you don't have that, then I think that really pulls back on the distrust. And a lot of times the community will not welcome you, right? They don't want you to be in and then leave. And then they're left with all of these people that have started employment but don't have supports.
Perfect. Darcy?
I agree. I think it's very important to come into an environment where it's a disability inclusive hiring environment, where I think it's important that we reframe and focus on business advantages instead of only accommodation. I think it's very important to be very vocal about your needs and how you can contribute and the why. And I think once you're in your position, I think demonstrating ability in certain tasks and leadership in certain tasks is very important. But I think verbal communication about what your needs are and how that employer can meet your needs so that you can potentially do very well in that position is key. Again, a lot of this comes down to taking a strength-based approach when including those with disabilities into the workplace.
And I'm just going to end with my final question, and it's just to wrap it all up. What do you hope for the future of inclusive employment in Canada? Anna, I'm going to start it with you.
I agree with what many of you said. We need to move away from this is the norm and that's extra accommodations that we provide, right? How about everybody has their own slate? There is a mosaic of things to pick from. And, if you really grind it down to the basics, I myself have disabilities in elements of learning as well, right? So probably strengths-based and just to actually help that person understand themselves better as well, right? As in, this is the menu of task and accountability that you are, responsible for. And these are your needs and strengths and whatever. And let's see how much of them we can, come to terms or align, right? Like almost like doing psychological tests. But, instead of the one side psychological test to determine the correct character traits of the candidate, it is accountability tests for the employer and adaptability tests for the employer and strength-based and accountability tests for the candidates, and match them to, for scoring or whatever to determine if there is a mutual dating benefit between the two of them, and then hence go forward, right?
Perfect. Carolyn?
Yeah, I love this. I mean, generating ideas and being flexible. So one thing that we found with the employer partners that we had is that they were willing to be flexible. And I think that's extremely important, right? So in looking at and thinking about how are you going to meet the needs of all employees, potential employees, how flexible are your policies? How much do your employees, your supervisors, your managers, how much do they know about human rights and disability rights and inclusion and equity? How much do they really know, and are they practicing it? And then the number one, I mean, Anna, I love that idea about, yeah, let's have some tests for the employer, because it really does need to be a match. And that's one thing that we did, was we had like an interest inventory that we used to help guide, what type of employment are you interested in? Well, I think the proof in the pudding really, and employers can ask themselves this: how many people with disabilities do we employ? How many are in management? How many are supervisors? How many are trainers? And that really gives you a very frank and a very realistic picture of how close you're coming in, how open you are, and how flexible you are, and how equitable you are when it comes to your hiring. So are there people will feel more safe if they see other folks who are hired and other people who are in the company that are, thriving and enjoying themselves, and feel that that is a safe space. You can't create a safe space if policies and if, the status quo is still separating, or is still, looking at hiring folks with disabilities as an add-on, as Anna had said, or as an accommodation. We're doing you a favor. To me, that's what accommodation implies, is that it's not that you are deserving of it, but, we're kind of doing you a little favor over here. If that's not the case, we have to really emphasize how important it is that these are your accountabilities to each and every employee that you have.
Thank you so much. I'm gonna mic drop it there. Thank you, Carolyn. I'm just mindful of the time, and I think we're up. But this was such a wonderful conversation, and it was just the tip of the iceberg. This is really the start of the continuation of what we hope to be an ever evolving dialogue. We are filled with such culturally rich, diverse communities with diverse strengths, needs, joys, to be both supported but also celebrated. And I hope for those watching that it really inspires you to connect with your local communities, these communities here with RWA, to strengthen or to start your inclusive employment journey. So thank you again for tuning in and engaging. And I hope we go out there and really do the labor, really do the work to sort of correct the system that a lot of us benefit from. So I hope you took all of that away today. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to DWC for having us, and have a wonderful rest of your day. I don't think this is the end, but I think it is.